Welcome to Module 3 of your PLP training course. The objective of this module is to provide you with a brief overview of each section of the PLP. If you remember from Module 1, we showed you how to log on, or actually we showed you how to help your students log on to PowerSchool to access the PLP. So let's do that again real quick. I'm going to log on again as my child. We're going to go to eCollect Forms, and I'm going to access her PLP. All this should look familiar. We went through this in Module 1. Okay. One thing we want to note that I didn't mention earlier, I think it's important to recognize that your students are likely going to need to be readers and writers in order to complete this. If you have students who are not readers and writers, it may require some support from you to access the PLP and enter the information. Remember, K, 1, and 2 are not required to submit information via the PLP, if you remember the color-coded document from Module 2, but many teachers in the district are doing that with their younger learners. So just be mindful of the fact that your students may need some support. All right, so let's go through this real quick. Section 1 we talked about a little bit earlier. What we failed to recognize or mention earlier was that in Section 1, you may need to provide an opportunity for some explicit instruction in think time prior to completing this. The younger students obviously need more time than perhaps the older, but if you ask a child their passions and their personal prides and their personal improvements, those are all open-ended questions, and students may not be able to generate an authentic response to that, on the ready, real quick. You may need to activate some prior knowledge with those kiddos by using some read-alouds or anchor texts or guided discussions or some whole group brainstorming prior to completing the PLP, this Section 1 of the PLP. So just a couple things to think about in this section, Section 1. Let's move on to Section 2. Oops, remember we have to navigate. Yep, okay. Here we go. All right, in Section 2 of the PLP, this is about learner styles and preferences. We haven't talked about this yet in previous modules, but this section of the PLP is all about learner style and preferences. If you look at question 2.1 and 2.2, it says, based on an inventory taken in class, the results show that I likely learned new information, blah, 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 blah. If you remember from our August training, there was a Google folder shared with you. Let me find it real quick for you. Let's go to Google Drive. It's called PLP District Resources. In this folder that we shared with you at our August training, there's a folder in here called Learner Inventory Bank. If you click on this folder, there's, 6, 7, 8 possible interest inventories that would be suitable to use with your kids. Now you'll notice some of them are grade 2, 3, 4, 5, kindergarten. But if you click on this Word document, there are some links that will take you to websites that could be possible learner inventories. So going back to the PLP, when you get to Section 2.1, you need to make sure that you're giving that learner inventory to your students before they sit down to complete Section 2.1 and 2.2. Now, these learner inventories, these aren't the only inventories that you can use. We recognize that many teachers have something on the ready that they've used in their classroom year after year. You're welcome to use that if you have something, but if you don't have something and you don't want to start from scratch, here's a possible place for you to look, for some options so you don't have to start, from the bottom up. This could be a springboard of ideas for you. Near the end of Section 2, down here at 2.3 and 2.4, you'll notice that The questions ask the students to reflect on habits of mind. Again, if you're not having habits of mind conversations in your classroom with your kids, it may be difficult to fill out section 2 of the PLP. So you may need to give your children, your learners, the gift of time to have some meaningful, relevant conversations about, what is a habit of mind and what do they mean? And is there evidence of this in your own life? You're going to need to provide opportunities for reflection for your kids prior to section 2 of the PLP. So just a couple of things to think about in this section of the PLP. We want to navigate. Section 3, we're actually going to skip for right now because that's a pretty meaty section of the PLP. It's actually going to be its own module. So we're going to skip section 3 and jump on over to section 4 real quick. Okay. Oops, where'd it go? There it is, it's coming. All right. Now, if you remember, section 4 of the PLP is only relevant 7th grade and up. So if you're a kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade teacher, you can disregard this section of the PLP. It's pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot to it. We're just asking kids to forward think. What do you want to do after high school? When you graduate from high school, what do you want to do? As an adult, how do you hope to contribute to your community? Just trying to plant some seeds about forward thinking for our kids. Again, pretty straightforward, but again, you might want to give kids, a little bit of think time prior to this session or section of the PLP. And then the last section, section 5, right up here. This section of the PLP includes an intentional focus on perceived student supports. Students will be given the opportunity to select how supported they feel. They'll also be given the opportunity to indicate an in-school support person and an outside of school support person. There's an open-ended text box available for student input where they can reflect on a highly impactful school staff member down here. We want you to take a moment and just kind of consider why these various sections of the PLP were included and how these sections of the PLP might benefit learners and the learning process. The discussion question immediately following this module video will ask you to reflect on that, but we want you to think, how are these sections of the PLP beneficial to you, the teacher? And what's the direct impact on teaching and learning? And what's the impact on students and student achievement?